Great day, everyone. So today we'll be discussing Module 9, and that is communication for work purposes. So with the title alone, we are now going to be learning how to be effective communicators in the workplace, right? So that means when you all finish your studies, eventually you're going to be employed in a company or in a job of your dreams, and in there, you will still need to learn how to effectively communicate, of course, in terms of speaking or and writing. Yeah. So we will be touching some real life situations wherein you could use some of the guides and tips that I will be giving you and that you are going to be learning today. So I hope you do not only take down notes and remember it until your exam or until you finish this course, but also until you go out there and experience, see for yourself the real world, achieving your dreams to become successful in whatever endeavors you will be choosing. All right. So, first thing we have to know is how important communication is in the workplace. So, communication in the workplace is critical to establishing and maintaining quality relationships in organizations. Right. So, effective communication in the workplace is crucial in the achievement now of one's goals, of course, of any organization as well, institution, team, or company's goals. Right. Why is that so? Why? If there is now effective communication in the workplace, first, it can produce better outputs. It can also produce successful results. And it can also make or create strong professional relationships. And these kinds of relationships result in efficient and effective performances and productivity, right? Which means that when administrators now in an organization are unable to create an environment which promotes open and clear communication, it can have negative effect or negative repercussions on the work culture and also in the employee creativity or productivity, right? So the importance of effective workplace communication, we will be discussing it right here in the next slide. Number one, it creates job satisfaction. Okay. So when a company doesn't have open and easy communication, there will now be very few employees that could feel that they are satisfied with their jobs, obviously. Now, this is because employees would feel that they are not valued in the organization. Why? Because they feel that somehow their voices are not heard. And because of that, they also feel that their feedback is not important. No? When there is now an effective communication and efficient communication, that creates or builds trust and loyalty among the employees, which now yields to greater job satisfaction. Okay. All right. So, next, communication in the workplace lessens conflicts. Okay. So, most often than not, conflicts are inevitable. We all know that, right? In any kind of environment or situation, there's always conflict. There could always be conflict, no? That might arise anytime. So there is no better way to address those conflicts, but of course, by having an open communication. So, in doing so, you would get to explore different options now. You would talk it over. You would get to see different perspectives as to how to resolve that particular problem, right? So, conflict arises. Now, it can arise between you and a coworker or a client, no, or conflict with an administrator, your boss. No, so the first thing you have to do, is now to acknowledge that conflict. You have to recognize that conflict, address the roots or causes of it, and then communicate all possible angles, possible solutions, the sides of the conflict, both sides, and all the details. All right. For you now to be able to resolve it. Just remember that those conflicts can be resolved with proper and effective communication. Right. Next, let's go to increases productivity. As what we have said earlier, if the managers and the administrators, as well as subordinates, work together harmoniously, everything is communicated, you know, um, openly, especially what are the things that are expected of each one of them, of each one of the employees. And then, of course, if there's an open communication, everyone would be feeling valued. That's what we have said already, no? And so they will be putting now their best efforts, right? In order for them to reach their goals, no, and not just their goals, but the company or the team's goals as well. Okay, like a domino effect, it just follows. Then we have now it nurtures relationships. Of course, it automatically follows once again that if you have effective communication in the workplace, of course, you will also have harmonious relationships with your colleagues or your bosses or even with your clients, right? And most often than not, it results to having a good friendship, right? Lastly, it maximizes resources, adding all the points that we have said previously. When there's lesser conflict, when there's a greater job satisfaction, when there's an increase in productivity, no, then of course you avoid now delays. Now, everyone is empowered to reach the goals on time, no? And with that, of course, you avoid wasting time and you avoid wasting efforts. You do not redo a particular task once again because in the first place you have put your best efforts. Okay. Sometimes you also save financial resources and other resources as well. Right. So now we have here an administrator has no greater responsibility than to develop effective communication. Please remember that whatever positions you hold, no, especially if you are already ascending in the ladder, you're already getting promoted. So you have to remember that your responsibility is to develop effective communication. Okay. Now let's take a look closely as to why does communication in the workplace break down. Okay, if the administrators now fail to develop effective communication, then there will be a breakdown. Okay, so we have here the elements of communication as sender. You remember the encoding, the message, the medium, the decoding, the receiver. We also have the feedback. We have identified those no, during your midterms. We also have now barriers. Barriers also exist, no? So if barriers exist in these elements in any way, then complete clarity of meaning as well as understanding does not occur. Okay, there are two categories. Now we'll be discussing two categories of barriers, communication barriers in the workplace. We have environmental barriers and personal barriers. Let's go first with the environmental barriers. Okay, as the term suggests, of course, this would now be related to the setting and the things surrounding you in the workplace. First, we have time. Okay, this happens when you are, let's say, you are rushing things. Okay, it can happen that communication can be hampered because you are preoccupied and you cannot focus on what you're doing. No, you feel so much pressured. So this is again from our very first module discussion. Remember, this is kind of a psychological noise, right? I hope you still remember that. Okay, so these are also related to that. You have that barrier. No? Second, we have managerial philosophy. No, we have what are these? These are now what we call, for example, in bureaucratic company culture. No, it requires all communication to follow a chain of command. No, no, then it restricts now the communication flows and hinder the efficiency because there's a flow, then it passes to a lot of people, a lot of middlemen first, right? So management philosophy that is too strict, however, or too rigid, or that has to filter down from above, no, that's what we call now downward communication. This would now this could now hinder effective communication. Okay. Now I've mentioned about downward communication. What is that again? Let me reiterate it again. No, downward communication flows from a top level to a low level in an organization. Again, please remember that the downward communication is from the top to the low level in an organization. It becomes now, when does it becomes a problem? No, it becomes a problem now, for example, when your managers would really think highly of themselves and they think, that they're always right. Okay, they don't have time to listen to their subordinates, and all the other commands and orders and decisions are always coming from the top. That becomes a problem now. Okay, this is related not to this managerial philosophy now. Next, you have power and status. Okay, this is somehow related to the, again, what we have just discussed, because power and status can allow people to power trip. Okay. So we have this power tripping, and it happens a lot, right? Those who are in position do power tripping on employees because, of course, they have the power to do so and they have the higher status. Okay. And so, again, this is a very problematic scenario. Lastly, we have technologies, as what we have discussed during midterms, right? We are coming from different age groups, no? So some people or some subordinates, some employees coming from a certain age bracket may not really understand how technology works or how to fully navigate or maximize the usage of a particular technological instrument or tool, right? If there is communication, let's set an example. No, if there's a communication sent, no, through email or sent via an online platform, and then of course, let's say we have spam folders, and then some of you do not really check spam folders or are not aware of the fact that some mails can really go to spam even if they're important ones. So if one is not aware of this, then there could be a problem now in communication, because then one will not be informed, while one will not be able to receive this kind of important information. It could be a really important information or announcement and so on. Okay, so there is some trouble in receiving that message or announcement, and again, that is problematic. Okay, now let's proceed to communication barriers. That is now personal barriers. Okay, so personal barriers relate to the factors that are, of course, personal to the sender and the receiver and act as a hindrance in the communication process. Okay, these are personal to the sender and the receiver. Okay, so for you to, again, for you to fully understand that, let's take a look at these types. Now, number one, we have frame of reference, or these elements. No, frame of reference refers now to the set of beliefs and values of people in the workplace, of course, because people now in the workplace are coming from different walks of life, different culture, different socioeconomic background, political background, and religious beliefs and principles, and so on. Okay. And then they have to work together in that environment. So, of course, it's going to be problematic now because we cannot avoid that there could be some clash now of this frame of reference among employees, especially if you're kind of person, no matter what your position is, that tries to block all the other values and beliefs that are different from yours. So if you're not that open and accepting of other people's different or opposing beliefs, then it's going to be problematic. Okay. What do we have to do now? We have to, again, be more open minded. We have to become more tolerant, more accepting, more understanding about the things from the different perspective or from the perspectives of others in the workplace. Next, we have status quo. So, status quo, for those of you who are not familiar with that, it is defined as the current or existing state of affairs. No, it's the current or the present existing state. To maintain the status quo is to keep things the way they are. Okay, we have stick to the status quo. You can hear that, more often. Stick to the status quo. And that means keep things the way they are. Because, of course, it's the easier way. It's your comfort zone, no? Um, it has always been like that, And of course, you also asked, wouldn't it be nice if we all could just keep things the way they are and no change, right? But unfortunately, of course, we are talking about the world of business, for example, no, in the workplace. Unfortunately, the world does not work that way. Okay. In the world of business, competitors change tactics. Governments change policies, no? So there are so many let's say there are so many things that we cannot avoid to eventually change, no, as a result. This status quo now is not enough, and organizations now need to learn to adapt to that change, right? Adapt to that change and change as well. Okay, so if you don't want that change, then this is when status quo becomes a problem, right? If you are contented with what is happening right now, sometimes it's also related to lack of empathy. You don't empathize with the others. That's why you just stay there. Then it becomes a problem. Okay. The opposite now of status quo is the anti status quo. No, it literally means to refuse to compromise to the status quo or to compromise with the status quo. No, because to experience that anti status quo is to make a conscious decision now to reject staying the same for the good of the business. Again, please remember that anti status quo. Okay. I hope you're all holding your pen and paper, no, your pens and papers, because again, I want you to really listen to my discussion. I don't want to feed everything that I'm saying in the PowerPoint. So, as you can see, all the informations that I'm sharing are not written here because you really have to listen, right? So, I've also mentioned already, now there's a lack of empathy. I've already mentioned that earlier just now. This little empathy usually results in refusing to listen to alternative points of views. No, again, if you refuse to listen, then of course there won't be any change. You just stick to that. That's why it's related to what I said earlier, to the status quo. Okay, it's also results in holding grudges, being too judgmental, and blaming, forming opinions easily or early at an early stage. Again, being judgmental, and of course, you defend them without considering others' perspectives. No, you defend these judgments because you lack empathy. You do not put yourselves in their shoes. No? Now, how do we manage to overcome such communication barriers in general? No, all of these that we have talked about. Here are some tips from Longest et al. Okay, 2008. These are basically self-explanatory, so let me just read them to you. Okay, so first, environmental barriers are reduced if receivers and senders ensure that attention is given to their messages and that adequate time is devoted to what is being communicated. It's somehow related to increasing job satisfaction when your voices are heard, right? A management philosophy that encourages the free flow of communication is constructive. Okay. So again, we should not uh, stick to just plain downward communication. All right. It should be free flow of communication. Next, we have reducing the number of links. These are now the levels in the organizational hierarchy or steps between the sender and the receiver. Reducing these reduces opportunities for distortion. Of course, when there are, what we've mentioned, this middleman, that comes in between. So if we're going to reduce now these links, then we could probably have a more efficient flow of communication. Again, it also saves time, if we cut those links, right? The power and or status barrier can be removed by consciously tailoring words and symbols so that messages are understandable. Reinforcing words with actions significantly improves communication among different power or status levels. We also have using multiple channels to reinforce complex messages, decreasing the likelihood of misunderstanding. Okay. Other ways of overcoming barriers we also have here, personal barriers are reduced by conscious efforts of senders and receivers to understand each other's values and beliefs. Yes, it should be acknowledged, no? This conflict should be acknowledged. It's a conscious effort. You're aware of this barrier and that you should act on it. One must recognize that people engage in selective perception and are prone to jealousy. Okay. Sharing empathy with those to whom the messages are directed is the best way to increase effective communication. We have to have now more empathy, no? We have to put ourselves in the shoes of others. We also have use techniques that extend beyond traditional organizational lines to facilitate communication. For instance, the use of diagonal communication that flows through task forces or committees enhances communication throughout now the organization. Okay. What is now this diagonal communication? Okay. This diagonal communication, it's a direct dialogue between employees of different ranks who are not in the same chain of command. That is now the diagonal communication. For example, a software developer might collaborate with a marketing manager to better understand, their product needs and positioning, and vice versa, of course. No, there are no artificial structural barriers. This diagonal communication allows information to flow faster, right, and more freely because there are no middlemen. You just direct your questions, increase to the other people who are in another structure, right? So because all the data that you will need to get your work done will be there easily available. You don't have to reach a middleman and ask permission and so on and so forth. Okay. And because of that, an important point is that it also improves teamwork of the company as a whole, of the organization as a whole. Next, we also have use management processes that are cross organizational rather than confined to functional or department procedures. Implementing management procedures in the areas of planning, controlling, and managing information systems facilitate communication. Basically, you have to have different committees for planning, of course, there, for controlling and for managing, right? Okay, we have last two. Use human resources, policies, and procedures. These are job training and job rotation to enhance cooperation among members in organizations. And then use now management processes to resolve conflicts in an equitable manner to produce effective communication. Now that we have discussed the importance of communication in the workplace, no, and of course some possible barriers in communication as well as how to overcome them according to some sources, let us now deal with the kinds of business written communication, okay, in the workplace. Now, what are the types of communication that you're doing in the workplace? What are the usual things that are expected of you when you go out there and do your own career? Okay, these are those most often, no? Most often than not, these are the deliverables, what you have to do, what you have to produce. So let's take a look at this. Okay. Just remember, almost always the communication that is going in the workplace would be written communication. Okay. And most often than not, it requires now a formal register. Okay. Because it's business. So here, these are all most of that. We have texts, chats, emails, memos, letters, proposals, reports, resume, and application letter. Okay. Let's go first with business texting or chatting. All right. This is now a communication in the form of texting and chatting, obviously. And of course, it has become now a common way to connect because it's convenient. You know, wherever you are, whenever you need to, you can communicate with a text or chat. But it might not always be the best business communication, okay? Please remember that because a chat and a text might be informal at the same time. Now, let's keep in mind that they should be brief messages only. If you have long, complicated messages, then you have to use other business communication tools now, okay? So again, it should be brief. Now, here are the tips now for effective texting or chatting in the business, no, in the business workplace. First, know your recipient. When you are sending a text to a close colleague or office mate or a co-teacher, it's different, no? When you're texting or chatting your boss, the head, or even your client. Okay? Anticipate unintentional misinterpretation. No, of course, texting often uses symbols and codes to represent thoughts, ideas, and emotions. Now, given the complexity of communication and the useful but limited tool of texting, we have to now be aware of its limitation and prevent misinterpretation with, of course, because as I've said, it should only be brief messages, then you cannot elaborate there what you need to really say. So then sometimes it also creates misinterpretation, right? Next, use it when appropriate, but don't abuse it. Of course, contacting someone too frequently can border now to harassment. Okay, remember that, right? Especially on weekends, no? During breaks, especially during holidays. We have to now be respectful of someone's personal time, okay, or someone's family time, someone's day off. You know, in Germany, This is really like an unspoken rule. Okay. For example, they do not text or chat about work matters at midnight or after work hours or holidays or weekends. Okay. They respect day off very much. Again, it varies from one culture to another, one nationality to another, maybe. No, but yeah, it in Germany, it's really an unspoken rule. It's like rude if you talk about work in like for example, a social gathering which is not work related. So, yeah. Next, unplug yourself once in a while. It is related to what I have just said. No, when you feel constantly connected, when you feel lost or out of it, if you don't have your cell phone and cannot connect to people, no, then you really need to unplug, right? Sometimes being unavailable for a time can be healthy, you know. Again, everything in moderation, of course, including texting, right? Lastly, don't text, chat, and drive. Self explanatory. Okay, we all know for a fact that the likelihood of an accident increases dramatically if the driver now is texting behind the wheel, right? So, what is the implication of this? Now, being in an accident now while conducting company businesses or company business or when you are at work would reflect poorly on your judgment as well as your employer, okay, because they hired you somehow. Later if you're in the news, a man uh was involved in an accident while texting and driving. Now, a man who is working here, so and so. So, in the news, maybe they would report, of course, your company, where if you're driving a company car, even then it would be in the news, no, all over the news. So, then it reflects now the company as well. Why did they hire this guy? Okay. So, don't text, chat, and drive. Right. Next, let's go to email. So we have now email, electronic mail. We're all already familiar with that. So I'll be giving now some tips on how to use or do emails effectively, right? First, we have proper salutations should demonstrate respect. So you always have to have the salutation, okay? You have to have this is now dear Miss or dear Mr., dear ma'am, dear sir, okay? Or greetings or dear doctor, dear professor. So you have to use those salutations. All right, it's really important. Subject lines should be clear, brief, and specific. Okay, this helps now the recipient to understand the essence of the message. For example, proposal attached, or just like what I have been doing in our announcement boards, the subject line is module 7 synchronous session. Then, of course, you would know when, no? Monday synchronous. If sometimes I add that in the subject line as well. So it's very clear, short, brief, specific. Okay. Do not send something like an email about our schedule of classes this week. Then that's going to be long and very unclear. Okay. Not specific. Next, close with a signature. The signature has to identify now you as a sender or your name, your full name, and then if possible, your title. If of course in the future you have your title now, your position, your affiliations, and of course your contact number. Okay, contact information. Next, avoid abbreviations. Okay, besides having it as a rule in formal communication, remember we have to avoid abbreviations. An email now is not a text message, no, and the recipient may not understand if you have written LOL. Okay, laugh out loud. Is that even? Yeah, laugh out loud, laughing out loud. Okay, so please do not use abbreviations. And I also believe you please do not use these kinds of words, laughing out loud. Right? Next, be brief. Omit unnecessary words again. Let's say this really saves time because in the business, in work, time is gold. Of course, everyone is busy. So if you keep your email short, no, then it really saves time. What if that person has to read a lot of emails per day then? Okay. Next, use good format. Okay, this now includes line breaks between sentences. No, you have to divide your messages into brief paragraphs. Do not just put one long the paragraph there. Please divide it. No, for of course the comfort of reading it. Okay. I myself, when I see a long text, a long paragraph, oh my God, it's like, oh, what is this? Okay. Again, please remember a good email should get to the point and conclude in most often than not, in 3 small paragraphs or less. Okay, please remember that 3 small paragraphs or less. We also have reread, revise, and review. Okay, you have to catch now and correct spelling and grammar mistakes before you press that send button, right? Because it will take more time and effort to undo the problem or the problems caused by these, you rushing, being hasty, this poorly written email. When it gets to the receiver, then it would now be a problem. It would now be your problem to undo or how to correct it, right? So reread, revise, and review. Next, reply promptly. When we say promptly, this does not mean that you reply like a minute after the email was sent, of course. A prompt email now, no, a prompt email reply means within 24 hours. Okay. Within 24 hours, you should be replying. If you cannot reply within 24 hours, at least acknowledge that you have received the email, and then you can just tell them that you will be following up or you will be getting back to them, to the sender, after 48 hours or 72 hours or so. Okay. Next, use reply all sparingly. Do not send your reply to everyone who received the initial email, unless, of course, your message absolutely needs to be read by the entire group. Okay, please remember that. Avoid using all caps. Capital letters are used on the internet to communicate empathic emotion or yelling or, and this kind of impression is now considered rude. Okay, please remember that. Okay, next, test your links. If you include a link now, test it, okay, to make sure it is complete, it is the correct link that you have attached, okay, or you have included. And then give feedback or follow up. Okay, if you don't get a response in 24 hours, email or call them. Okay. Also, again, check the spam filters, spam messages. Okay. It might be there. Okay. So your recipients may never have received it. Next business communication tool, we have memos. Okay. So memos are often written from a one-to-all perspective. Okay. It's like a mass communication, broadcasting a message to an audience, right? Rather than a one on one interpersonal communication. It may be used to update a team on activities for a given project, for example, no? Or to inform specific group within a company of an event, action, or observance. Okay, a memo's purpose is often to inform. Please remember that. No, but it occasionally includes an element of persuasion or a call to action. Occasionally lang. but the main purpose is to inform. Okay, so again, memos written from one to all perspective, and its main purpose is to inform. Okay, we can also say that these are internal correspondences within the organization only or within the institution. Okay, you don't give a memo to your client. Please remember that. Okay, just give a memo to someone who is inside the same company and that you're actually administering or managing. Okay, I hope we're clear on that. Now, here are the things we have to consider when we are writing a memo. First of all, audience orientation of words. Okay, always consider the audience, no, and their needs when preparing a memo. For example, an acronym or abbreviation that is known to management may not be known by all the employees or of the organization. Okay, if the memo is to be posted and distributed now within the organization, the goal is clear and concise communication at all levels. Next, we have to observe professional and formal tone. Memos are often announcements. I've already said that. So the person sending the memo speaks for the organization. Okay. Next, we have subject emphasis. Just like what I said earlier, you have to really emphasize what the memo is. It's the same as the subject line in the email. Next, we have direct format. Now, by the way, the format of a memo is it has a header, okay? Header that clearly indicates who sent it, no, and who the intended recipients are. Okay? You have to pay particular attention to the title of the individuals in this section. Okay? You also have their date and subject lines, no? And then followed by a message that contains the declaration and then the discussion and summary or summary, okay? Usually the first thing that you're going to see there is to, yun na nga, diba? To, and then the audience, no, or the recipient, for example, for to all the faculty members, okay? And then from so on, no, you can say from the head, from the department head, okay, from the dean. And the subject line is subject General Assembly, English area, something like that. Okay. When we say direct format now, some written business communication allows for a choice, no? But memorandums or memos, no? Memorandums are is the complete word for memos. Please remember that. For memos, it should always be direct, no? Meaning the purpose is clearly announced. Okay. Last, objectivity. Memos are, of course, a place for just the facts because the purpose is just to inform. No, so it should have an objective tone without personal bias, preference, or interest. No, on display. Avoid subjectivity. Okay, although it may seem very short and casual, we have to make sure now that it still sounds very objective. For example, we don't say see ya. Okay, you don't put it at the end. See ya. Okay. Or XOX, hugs and kisses. No, in the memo, you don't put that. Unless, of course, the workplace is, is that friendly. Okay. The workplace is has this kind of environment, friendly environment. Okay. So next, let's move on now to the letters. Okay, letters. Now, unlike memos, which are internal correspondence, letters may be internal and external at the same time because you can give a letter to a client, outside the organization. No? You can give a letter to a possible partner or a possible business partner as well. Okay. So we have different elements of letters or simply parts of the letters, and these are the following. Okay. So I will go over them briefly. Just look at the example and then you can read on this later on. No, you can read on this as you review along. No, I'm sure you're all familiar with them already. We have here the letterhead. Okay, again, please read through it on your own. We have the sender's name and address, date, receiver's name and address. We also have sub or re. It stands for subject or reference. No. Salutation. Okay. Introduction, the body. Of course, we conclude it, no? And we have the closing or close, no? Please also read this part. This is very important, no? Sincerely or cordially are standard business closing statements. When you use love, yours truly, and BFF, these are now suitable for personal correspondence. It's not for business. So even the closing, you have to be aware which are for business closing statements and which are for personal, no, informal, and which are formal. Closing statements are normally placed one or two lines under the conclusion and include a hanging comma as in sincerely. You also have to be aware of the punctuation that you're going to use. Okay. Followed by, of course, signature, preparation line. No, this is not always part. No, if the letter was prepared or processed by someone, okay, other than you, then of course, okay, you have to put preparation line. We have enclosures or attachments and courtesy copies or CC. Okay. So then we go now to business proposal. If business proposal, you usually do this when you're trying now to look for a possible partner or possible partners for a business project, okay? Or when you're trying to present a business project itself. So, an effective business proposal informs and persuade efficiently, okay? So, there is now the element of uh, persuasive communication. Okay, it features many common elements of a report, but the emphasis is persuasion. Please remember that because again, you're trying to propose a business. Okay, no, you're trying to pitch an idea that has to be bought. Okay, so then it follows that you have to really have a great deal of persuasion or persuasive communication. Now, these are the elements of a business proposal. Again, I'm going to upload this, no? And you can just go over the explanations here, okay? Let me just go over them quickly. We have cover page, executive summary, background, proposal, and market analysis, okay? Now, let's proceed to reports, okay? What are reports? Reports are actually designed to record and convey information to the reader. No? So reports are part of a business presentation, but these are more likely to be informative in nature rather than persuasive. No? It's different from business proposal. So it's more informative, not persuasive. Because you're just basically putting forward the facts, no, or statistics depending on the kinds of report. And speaking of kinds of reports, we have here the some of the types of reports. These are just top 10, but of course there are a lot as well. So we have informational reports, analytical, operational, product, industry, department, progress, internal, external, vertical, and letter reports. Of course, you don't have to know them because, of course, you will know them as you dive into your uh, own respective careers. Then you would know what kind of reports you are to do. Okay? But just remember, reports are more informative than persuasive. Okay. Right now, we have resumes. Okay. Resumes are your first step towards your career. Okay. This is your first shot at getting that dream job that you want. Okay. And that you deserve. Right. So, a resume now summarizes your education, your skills, your employment history, and experiences in a clear and concise format for potential employers. Okay, last time I asked you to do a resume, right? No, or CV. So I'm sure you're all familiar with that by now. Okay, but let's just go over the three main resume formats. Okay, just remember, almost always, employers look for a reverse chronological or the chronological resume. Chronological resume is also called reverse chronological, and it's ideal for candidates seeking a job similar to their previous positions, students and entry level candidates, and academic resumes. Okay, if you want a more detailed explanation of these, please again refer to Module 9. I will be uploading a text which explains these three main formats. Okay, you can also go over this here: functional resume, creative jobs where portfolio matters most, military transitioners, and also candidates who don't want to seem overqualified. Hmm, okay. Maybe those candidates who have a lot of experiences already. Okay, combination resume. These are, of course, ideal for seasoned professionals targeting a specific position. Career changers. And then also people with employment gaps. Okay, this is ideal. So you have to um, make your resume, no, according to the following purposes. Lastly, I would like to add here now application letter. Okay, sometimes called a cover letter. Okay, it's sometimes called cover letter. It is now a special kind of business letter that accompanies a resume. Okay, for a job application, right? It gives you now an opportunity to make a strong impression on an employer. No, it is your way of marketing your skills. No, it can explain who you are and what you can do for them. Okay, for the company that you're applying for. Okay, when writing an application letter, remember you have a lot of competition. Okay, your audience is a professional who screens and hires a lot of job applicants, right? This person, no, may have looked through dozens and hundreds of other applications on the day she receives yours, right? So remember to make sure you have made the best cover letter of your life or application letter of your lives. No, the immediate objective of these of your application letter and accompanying resume is to attract that person's attention. Okay, your ultimate goal is to obtain an interview. So, when preparing a job application letter, follow these simple steps to make sure your letter does not, or to make sure your letter includes the information a hiring manager needs, HR. Okay. First, emphasize your skills and abilities. An application letter is your opportunity now to sell yourself as the perfect candidate, for that position. Include specific examples now of situations in which you applied your experience, abilities, and skills to the benefit of the organization. Next, stay concise. Okay, stay concise. Although it may be tempting to include a lot of detailed information about yourself, it is important to be concise. No, if a hiring manager receives a letter that is multiple pages, no, of course they might not take time to read it. Remember, they are screening a lot of applicants, no, so make sure it's going to your letter is brief and concise. Okay, proofread the letter. Since this letter is serving you as your first impression, you want to make sure it is as positive as possible. Make sure your letter now does not have any grammatical or spelling errors to avoid, potentially having a negative impression, okay, for the first time. Okay. So review the job listing keywords. Most job postings will include now certain skills and abilities that the hiring manager and supervisor want applicants to possess. Okay. And lastly, send a letter for every position to which you apply. Okay. Send a letter for every position to which you apply. Unless a job specifically states not to send a letter, no, an application letter, it is smart to send one for each job to which you apply. Okay, this letter offers the opportunity now, no, for a potential employer to learn more about you and gives you the chance to set yourself apart from the applicants. Right? These are all the things that you have to know for today. So that's module 9. Please again go over this video because you will be doing a task next meeting. And if you have questions, then please don't hesitate to ask me. Okay. I hope all this information that we have discussed today are useful. You have understood all of this, and I hope it will be useful in the future for all of you. Right? So that's about it. We'll see each other next meeting. Thank you so much and see you all.